superior check ligament or proximal check ligament. So that guy's up here, kind of like right at the back of the carpus or a little bit above the carpus. He connects to the superficial digital flexor tendon. So there's actually two check ligaments, although to this point we really just talked about one. All right. And remember what a check ligament does is if this is my digital flexor tendon, the check ligament keeps it from getting a little long, right? Keeps it in check. And that will impact your potential surgeries. We already talked about this. And don't forget your suspensory. Where does he connect? Where does he attach? I heard it. Sesamoids. It's useful to remember. And what does he sit in between up here? What's this bone right here? Not the cannon bone. He sits between two of them. 2 and 4, which are called the what? Okay. That's probably important. Alright, so when we have a club foot, like this guy right here, here's a nice picture. See, this is the green, the deep digital flexor tendon coming down. He's not attaching anywhere else, but oh, look there, he's attaching right there. So he's got a really good leverage point to pull that bone backwards. We also have our check ligament attaching right here, palmar carpal ligaments to the deep digital flexor tendon. So when you have a less severe club foot, just one that is past conservative treatment, but you don't think is like, that huge stage 2, awful looking thing. The treatment of choice surgically for that is to cut the check ligament. All right, cutting the check ligament is a less big deal than cutting the whole ligament. Cutting that deep digital flexor tendon, that is a salvage procedure. That's a big deal. All right, but if I have one that's not that bad, I still think he could be an athlete. I want to give him the best choice possible. I could just cut that check ligament itself. My horse has no check ligaments because I took them out back when I was a surgery resident and he was a research horse. So I actually took out both front check ligaments because he was part of a research project, and now I'm jumping and showing him. So check ligaments are fine. You can lose those, no problem. They still be athletic. So stage 1, right here, treatment of choice. Okay, you can get away with it, treatment of choice. Now, if you can't, you have a really severe one, or you tried to check ligament maybe and it's just still a disaster, you may have to cut the whole deep digital flexor tendon. A couple ways you can do that. You can do it up here proximally or down here at the pastern. Don't worry about that too much, but a couple of different ways you can do it. But that is a salvage procedure. I just want this horse to live happily in the field. I realize I can't race it. So for the, this picture is not showing exactly what we're talking about with the flexural deformity. Ignore that, just look at the anatomy. So for a flexural deformity at the level of the fetlock, when you have your superficial digital flexor tendon, it's the same exact thing as this. You just replace the distal check with the proximal check and the superficial check with the deep, superficial digital flexor tendon with the deep digital flexor tendon. Just replace those with superficial on both, right? So if you have your fetlock deformity, if you can get away with a superior check ligament dysmotomy, just cut that check, better. And if you have to cut the entire superficial digital flexor tendon, that's a salvage procedure. Carpal contracture, these don't do great, but what you would cut if you were going to try is ulnaris lateralis and flexor carpi ulnaris. So that's it for that. Did that make sense? Okay. I'll put these up on Blackboard. So let's go ahead and start our skeletal tendon ligaments. Your brain's good. So tendinitis and desmitis. Desmitis means an injury equivalent to tendinitis in the ligaments. So desmitis, I don't know why they don't call it ligamentitis, but it's desmitis for the ligaments, tendinitis for the tendons. So one of the reasons I love horses is that they're just amazing athletes. They're professional athletes, a lot of these guys, big show jumpers and racehorses. It's just unbelievable what they can do athletically. And because of that, the tendon and ligaments get injured very often. It's been estimated up to 46% incidence in the performance horse industry for having some sort of tendon or ligament injury. That's like like half of these horses experience this at some point, so it's huge. It's the single most common reason racing thoroughbreds are retired. Again, think about all the money that's invested in these horses. You know, a lot of them are worth, you know, 6 figures and stuff and more. And it's a big reason why we lose these horses out of performance. And then once they are injured, 70% of the ones that are injured fail to return to the previous level of performance, which means they may come back to a lesser racing category or showing division, but they're not going to get up to where they were before. So big problem. Lots of money goes into treating these. Brief anatomy review. So tensile ligaments are organized into a hierarchical arrangement of subunits. So you have fibrils, fibers, fascicles, and you can kind of look at this little diagram here. And the collagen bundles are organized into parallel structures under lines of tension. So, you know, you've got your deep digital flexor tendon coming down, you know, from proximal to distal, and you have these little parallel bundles that are going from proximal to distal too. And then the fibroblasts, on this picture, are arranged every once in a while between the collagen fibers. So, extracellular matrix is ECM, and it's made up of amorphous round substance, don't worry about that too much, and then these fibrous elements, most of which is collagen. So 80% of the dry weight of this stuff is collagen, and most of that is type 1 collagen. And the remainder is going to be mostly type 3. A little bit of a difference between ligament and tendon, 85 and 95, don't dwell on that. Just remember most of it's type 1 in the normal tendon. I have this in for research. You just say, don't worry about it, Colin. We're not going to dwell on that. Okay. So think about a horse. Think about the distal limbs versus the proximal body of the horse. Big bodied animals, 1,000 pounds, 1,500 pounds, running around on skinny little legs, right? Okay, so skinny little legs down here, not a lot of muscle, not a lot of soft tissue, gives us all sorts of problems when it comes to wound healing, but it makes them really fast. So the reason they develop like that is because they evolved to be running away fast from predators. So they're very efficient in locomotion because of the fact that they have all their muscles up here and don't put a lot of muscle down in the distal limb. What that leads to is a long tendon. Okay. Remember the anatomy picture is that superficial, that deep, and to some degree the suspensory ligament, they're quite long, especially the superficial and deep, leads to a lot of potential wound injury. Question? All right, so we just did this, so this should be easy. Number 1 is what? Yeah, number 2. Give me the whole name for this. Yeah, distal or inferior check ligament, or the accessory ligament of the deep digital flexor tendon. We have to use 2 names for every single thing in horses, right? So remember the accessory ligament, just think about it as like, it's the same thing, it goes along with that deep digital flexor tendon. So ALDDFT, accessory ligament of the deep digital flexor tendon, or the check. 4 is what? Yeah. And then put 5 on there because it was there. All right, so here's an ultrasound, and we're going to start talking about ultrasound. You guys looked at ultrasound at all in radiology? So not so much, right? Okay. I have a little section in here on how to hold your probe and stuff. I wish I had more time to talk about this. I wish you guys got more. It's such a big part of what we do. But let's just start here. When you're looking at an ultrasound, you have a probe, and the probe usually has a little dot or a little, indentation or something like that on one side. By convention, we either hold that dot or marker like proximally or laterally. So when I have my probe, think about a probe like being this shape, right? So I'm either holding it like that or I'm holding it like that. One side is going to have a little dot on it, so I, by convention, just the way we all do it, so we can all look at the piece the same, hold that dot up or laterally. Okay. So when I'm looking at this image here, I know that the way we always look at this image is with the skin at the top. Okay. So this is a transverse image, meaning this is like, let's see, if this is the horse's leg, this is the horse's leg, I'm taking my slices this way, as if I was like cutting through a tree with a chainsaw, okay, to make like circles. So what I'm seeing is a cross section through all these tendons and ligaments here. So up here is skin. All right, you can see this is about 4 centimeters deep right here. This first structure here would be what? Yep. Second structure? Yes. Yep, you're all saying it right. Good. See how big it is. Don't forget about it. It's really big. And what's this guy here? Good. Excellent. And what is this shiny white line here? I heard it. Bone, yeah. So that's the back of the cannon bone. Remember the, well, you can't see, it's like there, but we're not looking through the splint right now. You're right, center line, so you're looking at the third metacarpal. So back of the cannon bone. Very good. Now, we'll look at some transverse images to show you, what happens when you flip that probe. It's basically exactly the thing. You just count from the outside towards the bone, and that gives you top to bottom. Here we are. Okay, so you just did this superficial, digital, deep check, and the suspensory ligament. Now, what I did to start, I was holding my probe this way. All I've done is I've turned my probe 90 degrees. That's how I got this longitudinal scan right there. And what I have is the same exact thing. So if I look, these are not actually from the same horse. I just tried to find one that would match as much as possible here. But basically what's at this level here is still at this level here. Okay, so this thing, if I have these images right next to each other and it's the same exact horse, I just say what's here is here, what's here is here, what's here is here, and what's there is there. That makes sense? And here's the image of how you're holding that transverse scan. You're holding that probe, like horizontally, and a longitudinal scan, you'll hold it vertically. This thing on here is a standoff, by the way, this yellow thing on the outside of it. It's like a little, not rubber, I don't exactly remember what it's made of, but it's a little thing that if you'll get a better picture when you're a little further away from the skin surface if you're looking at a structure that's really superficial, like the superficial. Okay, now we talked about tendon sheaths, and we talked about different synovial structures that are affected by whatever. Remember, when you're ultrasounding, you will be looking at tendon sheaths. When you're doing your exam, you may be looking at for a fusion of the tendon sheath. Where a tendon changes direction, often over a joint, is often where you'll have this tendon sheath. So here's my digital flexor tendon. Here's my superficial digital flexor tendon. These are my sesamoids here, and this is all sitting inside a synovial structure, kind of like that. Okay. So this empty space here is what I'm looking at here. And then this is an example of, like, this image here is taken basically right at the back of the fetlock, so I can see my sesamoids right there. There's some effusion above it, there's some effusion below it. Right at the back, I don't see as much because I have the angular ligament like a seatbelt on it. So, continue to talk about how forces are formed and the weight-bearing loads. So remember, they have this naturally hyperextended fetlock joint. That is normal. The more hyperextended that is, and especially with the lower the heel, the more stress you're putting on the back of the limb. So as you can imagine, if this is hyperextended, you're stretching these even further. Okay. But even if it's not abnormally shaped, there's a lot of stress at the back of the limb, which leads to a lot of injury of these tendons and ligaments during exercise. So one of the things that makes the horse really fast is that they can use these weight-bearing tendons like springs. So they take a stride, they stretch those out, the amount of stretch as the horse steps down, and then they use that to propel themselves in the next stride. So it makes them very, very efficient and fast, but it also, remember, it places a tremendous amount of stress on those tendons with every step. And also they're acting as shock absorbers. So, if you think about them as springs, which is pretty much what they are, they have to, if you take a little spring, if you just kind of open it a little bit, you're not going to get a lot of recoil, right? You stretch the spring just a little bit, but if you really stretch that spring, it snaps back. So, for a spring to work effectively, or for a tendon ligament to work effectively, it has to stretch close to what it can maximally handle. In vitro, meaning in experiments, the amount of stretch that the superficial digital flexor tendon can do before it pulls apart and completely fails is between 10 and 20% of its length. All right, so think that is like, in an experiment, if I stretch that thing 20%, it blows apart. Right? The ultimate tensile strain would be basically right up here. This is the tendon rupture right here. This is a very important graph called a stress strain curve. So you can read here, stress is force per unit area, strain is the change in length of the original. Here's kind of where we start at the toe region where not much is happening. The linear region is where most of the work occurs of the tendon. And then you get to this tendon rupture point. The ultimate tensile strain is right before that point. So, remember I said, 10 to 20% before the eruption. The maximal stretch in the superficial digital flexion tendon reported in real, actual galloping thoroughbreds is like 16%. So that is so close, it's not even above where those things experimentally flow apart. So, huge amount of strain on these tendons, even normally without anything happening. So, they're close to their functional limit. So when we have tendonitis and desmitis, there's a couple different things, ways this can happen. It can happen with you starting out with a normal structure, normal ligament, let's say, and we step into a hole, or we take a really bad step. It goes from normal to injury. Nothing going on with it before, I step bad, big injury happens. The other way it can happen is that there's little bits of micro damage, progressively weakening the structure, usually a tendon. No one really notices, maybe the horse is not lame, there's not much heat, not much swelling, something like that. Because it's just a little bit over time, and then all of a sudden, the amount of damage overwhelms the body's repair mechanisms, and you end up with an injury. But most of the time, when a tendon has an injury, it's that second way, it's the cumulative degenerative. Most of the time, when a ligament has an injury, it goes from normal to abnormal. So sometimes deep digital flexion tendon, of course there can be some that are outside the usual, but usually some overload is ligament, and most tendons are cumulative degenerative. So after the period of skeletal maturity, after you're no longer a growing fold, that sort of thing, there's a poor ability of tendons and ligaments specifically to adapt to exercise. That's not the case in bone. Bone adapts to exercise really well. But the tendon and ligament doesn't adapt to what you're asking of the horse particularly well. Thinking especially racehorses. So we're not entirely sure why. Cellular senescence, maybe the cells are just not active anymore. Maybe you don't have growth factors when you're not a growing young horse anymore. But that's the case. Now one thing I want to talk about is crimp, collagen crimp ankle. So when you have a collagen in a normal tendon that's just standing there, it's not under stress, you're not galloping, it's just a resting force. It's not just a straight line that goes up and down. You guys are probably big enough for this. Do you remember back in the 80s? People used to put these like crimpers in their hair, and it would like be like a zigzag. Oh yeah, Google it. Don't know what you're talking about. But anyway, so a crimper, right? Now a normal collagen is like crimped. Okay. When the horse like steps down at the gallop, that stretches out. Okay, so it goes from like zigzag crimp to like stretched out and then back. That's the normal way it operates. Now, especially in the center, look down here at the center of the ligament, or the tendon here. See this little red circle? This is the core of it, the middle of it. The crimp angle, or the amount of crimp is less there, so it's less zigzaggy and less crimped in the middle than it is at the outside of the tendon. The reason I'm talking about that is because it influences the kind of injuries we get. Alright, so the outside, like, kind of between the red and the green here, has more crimp than this little center layer. So what happens when you have this horse like taking a bad step or just doing a bunch of cumulative damage, the part that gets tight first tends to be the middle. So a lot of times when we have a lesion, we end up with a lesion right in the middle. This is kind of a little bit more to peripherally, but you can see it's still like a circle in the middle, right? Like a little black hole in the middle. And the reason for that is because the center fibers are straightened first under load. I guess what I take from this is that the superficial digital flexor tendon and the suspensory ligament are the ones that we see injured most often. There certainly can be other things, deep digital flexor tendons or check ligaments, things like that. But what you'll see the most is suspensories and superficial. Now what they look like, you can imagine most inflammation, heat, pain, swelling, lameness. See that between the arrows here, there's a, kind of a edematous, probably just generally thickened area too. That could be a superficial or a deep, from like here to here. Risk factors for injury include horses at speed, race horses, the weight of the horse, larger horses, fatigue, they can no longer buffer the amount of stress they're placing down with one step, and then a low heel and a long toe. Remember I talked about it a billion times now about long toes and low heels and how much extra stress that places on the entire back of the horse's legs, those long toes. So, we very commonly use ultrasound to diagnose these guys. Your clinical exam is really important. You'll feel it, you'll try to palpate what ligament or tendon you think is involved, feel the amount of swelling or heat, but ultrasound is really, really useful here. So we want to see exactly what tendon or ligaments involved, to what levels, like how far up proximally, how far up distally, and then how big the lesion is inside. And that can really help you determine later on how well the horse is healing or what treatments you want to choose. Now the optimal baseline ultrasound is a week after injury. So you injure on a Monday, you come out and ultrasound that horse, it may look one way, and then you ultrasound it the next Monday, it may look worse. Okay? So you want to use your